Welcome to the EntrePastors podcast on YouTube. This is a show that helps pastors think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs. Well, hello and welcome to the EntrePastors podcast on YouTube. Guys, my name's John Sanders. I'm so grateful to have you joining us for another episode here. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to the guest you're getting ready to hear from today. One of the things that we are so excited about here at EntrePastors is seeing and hearing stories like the one you're getting ready to hear. We want this to be the normal reality for many pastors around the world today. Pastors that have the ability to do a great job in church ministry, but then can step out into the marketplace and build a successful business that can do some really cool things for their family. So today, you're going to hear from our guest, Mike Harper, just a regular pastor who was also getting paid like a regular pastor, so therefore was somewhat struggling financially. And it wasn't until his daughter needed to go to college, a very expensive private college at that, where he was confronted with his need for, it's not just enough to do a good job of budgeting my income. Like, sometimes we just flat out need to make more money. That's exactly what he did. He leaned into a skill that he had utilized multiple times throughout his life, the skill of painting. He launched his own painting business, and he's doing phenomenal with it. So I can't wait for you guys to meet Mike and to hear his story. So without any further ado, let's cut to this interview that I did with Mike Harper. Check this out. Well, Mike, it is my honor to have you as a guest on the EntrePastors podcast. How are you, my friend?
I am doing great.
Well, welcome to the show. We're grateful to have you. So just a little context for our audience. I heard your story when we interviewed Jody Pastori for our podcast, and Jody and I are good friends. He's been in my coaching group, my mastermind, for a while, and he just kind of mentioned a pastor that he helped launch a business and talked about some real success that you were having with your business. And I thought, man, I want to talk to this guy. So I'm honored that you and I were able to connect and that you're here sharing your story. I know our audience is in for a treat here. So why don't we start with this? Just a simple question. Why don't you give a little introduction of yourself to our audience? Tell us where you are in the world and maybe tell us a little bit about your journey into pastoral ministry, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, currently I live in Charleston, West Virginia, a little suburb called Sissonville, West Virginia. And I'm just finishing my 19th year as pastor of North Hills Baptist Church. I'll be beginning my 20th year here at this church. Of course, my journey began back in 1986. I was getting ready to head off to the Coast Guard. That was my passion. I lived in Ohio, right off of Lake Erie. So my entire life, I watched the Coast Guard patrolling Lake Erie, and that was my passion. That was my goal. And once I got that in my head, I wasn't going to change my mind at all until the Lord got a hold of me one day. And I could sense the call to ministry, but I rejected it because I wanted to do my own thing. Like probably many of your pastors that are listening have a similar story. And it was on a Sunday night. A missionary came to our home church there in Conneaut, Ohio, and just his message was very simple but very powerful. And I knew then that this is the path God had for me. So I changed my plans, went along with God's plans. I graduated from Bible college, and in 1991, I started my first pastorate. For 6 years, that pastorate was no pay. So I was a manager of a restaurant and later a manager of a vending company there in Ohio, and doing pastoral work without a salary. Then in 1997, God called me to Tallahassee, Florida, and I was on pastoral staff working for a ministry up there. And that's when I got my first full-time salary as a pastor, making $24,000 a year. I thought I was a rich man.
What'd you do with all that money?
It all went to rent living in Tallahassee. So, yeah, but and of course, I worked there then. And of course, after a year of working there, my lovely wife, we've been married going on 24 years now. She taught college at Pensacola Christian College. I lived in Tallahassee. And obviously, we fell in love, got married, and moved to West Virginia, where she's originally from. And I worked one ministry in West Virginia. Then I was called to North Hills Baptist Church. And of course, I've been here since the beginning of 2003.
Fantastic.
And it's wonderful.
Well, so here, this is interesting. Did I hear you say then you never did end up going to work for the Coast Guard? Like that was a dream, but you ended up diverting and going into pastoral ministry?
Absolutely. Yes. God changed my mind.
Yeah. That's interesting because I took a very hard look at the Coast Guard as well. The thing that deterred me, I also was running from a calling that I had sensed from a young age. I really sensed that God would not stop me if I headed toward pastoral ministry, and so I did my best to suppress that and run from that. But I ended up becoming a firefighter instead. But I looked hard at the Coast Guard. But I decided when I talked to a recruiter and he said, well, we can't guarantee, because I was like, I want to be maybe on a coast somewhere doing like search and rescue stuff. And that's what I had in my mind. And he said, well, you could end up on the Illinois River checking buoys and stuff. I was like, oh, well, knowing how my luck goes with those things, I was like, that's probably where I'd be. So anyway, I find that interesting that you took a look at that career path, but ended up in ministry. So tell me about this, and you don't have to go too deep into this, but that, the first 6 years you're serving as a pastor, you're doing it with no salary. And then on year 7, you break into the full-time gig and you're making $24K. Now, well, to be fair, that's in 1997. So that maybe went a little farther, but still, that's probably not a lot of money in 1997 either. So what is it about us as pastors that cause us to be willing to step into a job with no pay? Like, how many other careers out there can we call people into and go, oh, by the way, we don't have a salary for you, but you get to do the work, and it's even full time, we'll call it. So tell me about that. Like, what is it? We all have our own reasons, but why did you work for 6 years with no salary?
Well, once again, it's a calling. And people have this mindset that all ministers have to make the ultimate sacrifice. They must be poor. For them to be humble, they have to be poor. And of course, the ministry that I worked for the first 6 years, I was willing to work for free due to the fact that I had a very good, at the time, paying job. I was the head manager of a restaurant, then was promoted to district manager, then a vending company in Ohio wooed me away from that and doubled my salary. So financially, I was able to do that. Then 97, that's when I started getting paid for doing ministry.
Here's a question. When you made that transition so you're working as a pastor, but I'm hearing you say you had a pretty livable income, a decent income. So then when you moved to the full-time gig, and I'm assuming that comes with a pay decrease, right? Now that you went down to 24,000, that probably represented a loss in wages, correct?
Yeah, huge.
And you don't have to answer this if you don't want, because I'm not trying to call out any one church or anything like that. I'm asking this more for the audience, because other pastors out there today sitting in a similar place where you were then, what would have happened, do you think, if you would have approached that church and said, hey, I've got this idea to be in business for myself, in addition to being a pastor here, but 24K is not quite cutting it. I'll keep working for that, but I'm also going to do XYZ over here on the side. Like, how do you think that would have gone in 1997 in your story, if you had, or maybe you did request that or suggest that? I don't know.
Well, interesting. My backstory, when I was when I was, okay, I had it. You still there?
We got you.
I'm still in pastor mode because I'm still getting calls from church people. But anyways, as I go my backstory, back when I was 15, the only millionaire that we knew of in our community hired me to wash dishes and mow lawns at his restaurant. Well, I was very faithful at that, and he wanted me to paint all his rental properties. Well, I told him I don't know how to paint. Well, he says, well, I'm going to teach you. And boy, did he teach me. He taught me every detail. And from the age of 15 until the age of 52, I've been using painting as a supplement income. So when I was in ministry in Tallahassee, I continued to work full time, but also my days off in the evenings supplement my income from painting. They had no problem with that, provided that it did not interfere with my first responsibility. However, there's a lot of churches, some in West Virginia, they're kind of the old school. Mm-hmm. If God called you to preach, that's the only thing you can do. And you just need to trust God. Well, yeah, we trust God as preachers, but sometimes God says, trust in me, but pick up a paintbrush.
Amen. Yeah.
And it's worked. It's worked.
Yeah.
So back in 97, I was considered full-time at 24,000, but I also had to paint. And a lot of good stories there. I mean, I've painted for state senators of Florida, got to know a lot of good people in the legislation there in Florida, and got to make a lot of friends, painted their homes. And so I've always painted since the age of 15, even in ministry.
Oh, okay. Well, that's an interesting detail because, and not that there's anything wrong with this, but the way I understood Jody's story was that he kind of helped you get into that, or kind of helped set you up with a business. But hearing your side of the story, you've been leaning on this, like this has been a part of your life and ministry for quite some time. So this wasn't a new thing here more recently when you launched into a business of painting on the side.
Yeah, in the past, it was just a house here, a house there. It was, if I needed $100 that month, I found me $100 job. You know what I mean? Just to make ends meet. I did not have a quote company. I did not have Mike Harper painting. Just, hey, can you paint my living room? Yeah, I need $100. I'll do it. It wasn't until I got connected with Jody that we actually went in business together, and was at a perfect time, because that's when we were stressing about how we were going to pay for our children's college, because making $24,000 a year, and even when I came to this church that I'm presently at, my starting salary was $24,000.
Oh, wow.
Somehow magical number, 24,000, and family of four, very impossible to make it on 24,000. And so I painted when opportunities came. Then when my daughter decided that she wanted to go to a very expensive college, the fear of God was put into us. How in the world are we going to pay it? Because we're old school. We want to help our children. We paid all their education, their Christian school, and being in the ministry, there's not a lot we can offer our children financially. So the one thing we wanted to do is pay their college bills. So we were in panic mode. And of course, maybe we'll get into this. It's amazing how God answered prayer in a big way. And of course, God's answered prayer was through Jody Pastori. Wonderful story.
Well, I love that.
Share that when you get to it.
Yeah, and that's where I'd love to go. I'd love to hear that story then of how you had the mindset shift to say, okay, rather than just being something that, you know, I do occasionally when I need a few extra bucks, we're going to actually launch a business. And so tell the story, you know, how did this all come to be? I'd love to hear. And so riff away, and I'll jump in with questions if I think of any.
Well, it all started, of course, as I said, Jody and I, we've been friends for over 20 years, fellow pastors in the same association. So we would go to different association meetings and kind of a casual friendship in the same pastor support group. And one particular day, of course, I was at his job site, and I was just casually visiting him. I mean, just casually. And I made mention to him. I said, man, my daughter just picked a college that there's no way we're going to afford. I have no idea how we're going to pay for this. I know we need to trust in the Lord, but I don't know how this is going to happen because we already told our children we're going to pay for their college. And so Jody says, well, if there's anything I could do to help you, just let me know. And so we were just talking, whatever, and I made mention about painting, and his eyes lit up. He said, do you paint? I said, I've been painting since 15. He said, it just so happens that I'm looking to get into the painting part of the business, because he did the power washing. A lot of times after you wash and power wash something, a house needs to be repainted, or a deck needs to be restained, or things around a home needs to be kind of touched up after washing. He said, I've been looking for a painter. I said, well, I'm your guy. Well, wow. We went ahead and launched that. Of course, he was the main source of the business, the financial backer. And we made one mistake. This is the one mistake we made. We made business cards, and we started passing them out to customers. And it's been insanely busy, unbelievably busy, to the point where I told Jody, let's hold off on the business cards because I am booked solid for eternity. It seems like it's just amazing. And it all came from a prayer. Lord, how are we going to pay for our kids' college when we could not save? Because my highest salary in ministry has been $32,000 after the benefits and everything. And of course, my wife is a school teacher for a Christian school, very small pay in comparison to a public school. So there was a lot of sacrificing, a lot of panic every month. How are we going to pay our bills? How are we going to get through this month? And it was a real struggle. But the Lord always provided through the means of me painting and my wife piano lessons. And it's just been amazing. Now, the painting part of the business is just, I just cannot tell you how much God blessed. And it's all because of trusting the Lord, but going forward with a talent that he has given you. I did not realize back when I was 15 that particular skill that was taught to me by our community millionaire would support my family all these years. It's just so amazing. And it all comes down to the fact that God knew my needs before I knew my needs, and he provided that through this secondary business.
Yeah.
And absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing.
How many years ago was this that you formally kind of hooked up with Jody and started this as a more formal business?
It was about 6 years ago. That's when I was my daughter was still in high school. Of course, my son was in middle school, and she started looking at colleges her junior year. That's when the fear came. And it's amazing how every single step was provided by the Lord. Now, God didn't write me out a check and say, here's your daughter's college bill. He provided the platform to make it happen. And of course, the church that I'm at now for 19 years, I'm considered full-time with the understanding that I need to supplement my income because we're a small community church, and we don't have the big church salaries.
Yeah.
But they're very gracious in how they have taken care of me and my family. Little gifts here and there. It's just amazing. And it's all because of God's faithfulness. And when we as pastors are faithful, God will always provide a way. But we must be willing to take advantage of opportunities that come along. I think that's the key, is identifying what is an opportunity and what needs to be faith. That's the key right there.
Yeah. Did you have any, first of all, I want to ask about like barriers first in your own mind. Was there any mental roadblocks that you had to work through as you moved into this place of, I'm in business, like I have a business and we're going to operate this as a business? And then did you bump into any conflict? It sounds like your church is supportive, and I'm grateful for that, because nothing fires me up more than when I hear of a church that pays their pastor a pretty low salary and then forbids them from doing anything beyond that, as though somehow, hey, you should be grateful we're paying you $24,000 a year and letting you be full time. So did you have any personal mental hangups? And then did anyone in the church go, hey, pastor, we don't see you in the office as much as we used to? I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Well, what's amazing, the church that I'm right now, I say right now, I plan to be here until they get tired of me. But matter of fact, most of my customers starting out were church members. When I announced that I was going to take this on, I've painted for every single one of my deacons and their families.
Wow.
It's very, very supportive. I've done remodeling for a lot of our church people, and of course, they've been supportive. I believe my biggest hurdle is my own conscience, because I am so consumed with keeping on schedule. I have all these customers. As of right now, I kind of repeat customer texted me about 5 minutes before we got connected and wanting me to do a complete remodel job. And as of right now, I have over 30 clients waiting on me that I have booked throughout the year. And that's a lot.
Have you given thought to scaling your business and what that looks like to bring on a team, and so you can be in more places than once at the same time?
Well, yeah, Jody's been trying to get me to do that, but like I tell him, I want this business to be a blessing to meet the needs that we as a family have. And my daughter's college bill is done. My son, thankfully, joined the military. He's in the Air Force right now. Of course, his college is going to be paid in full with a GI Bill, but we're obviously going to with living expenses, because what you do for one kid, you have to do for the other. But regarding future business, I've had 4 individuals help me paint, and let's just say they don't have 30 years experience like I do in painting, and so it could, and like I mentioned, Jody's really wanting to take off with this, but the issue is I don't want this business to interfere with my first calling, and that's pastoring. Hopefully, it hasn't consumed me yet. Hopefully it hasn't got to the place where it's too much, because a lot of times, maybe pastors that are bivocational, their job straps them down so much that they have nothing left in the tank for ministry. I don't want to get there. I'm not there yet. And if I have a bunch of employees, that may create stress that I don't need, but people handle it differently. Jody handles it great. I mean, he's a success story. Yeah. My prayer was, God, help me pay these bills. And he did. I'm not looking to get a Rolls Royce or anything like that, or a Learjet. I just want to be comfortable and take care of my family. And I think that's been my focus. Every person's different. Every person has a different philosophy. My first calling is pastoring, and God has given me this platform of painting to supplement what I need to get through that month. Now, with being 52, I'm getting close to retirement, age-wise. I'm nowhere there financially. So obviously I'm going to have to be aggressive in painting and saving, because the salary I'm getting now really doesn't give me much to save for retirement. And of course, having a small salary in ministry all these years, we weren't able to save like we would like. So to answer your question, I'm not opposed to exploding with a bigger staff, but the problem is a lot of people can't paint.
Yeah. Well, there's two different kind of schools of thought on that in business.
Yeah.
The one is if you scale things out, obviously you can do more and be in more places than one. And so there's that whole thought, but there's that other thought of if you just want simplicity and where you build it around your lifestyle and it provides what you need it to, then I think the important thing is that you're clear on your goals and that the business is serving your needs first and foremost, because there's really no end in sight for how big a business could scale. And that's not always best. You sometimes can create something much, you create a monster basically. So I think you're wise in kind of measuring your priorities there and just seeing what's right for you and what's a good fit for you and your family. I was going to ask you about that too, just the whole concept of time. When I deal with a pastor who is successful in business, I like to hear, how do they, what are some tips or tricks, hacks you might say that you would share with another pastor that's thinking about starting a business, but is concerned? I still love the church. I still feel called to the church and want to serve the church. So, because what we're not saying is, hey, pastor, do a half job at the church, give them your second best. It's not my message to pastors. I think you can do both. So how do you do both? That's maybe the question. And what tips or advice would you give to that pastor that's thinking about maybe launching a business, but already feels like I'm overwhelmed with how much work I have to do in ministry, let alone launching a business?
Well, I can only tell you what works for me. Now, this may not work for everybody. Number one, I have a great wife. She keeps me balanced. She keeps me prioritized. I have amazing children that are very supportive. They have never caused me an issue, behavioral problems, and that's been a blessing there. So, and thirdly, I have a great church family. They're very supportive. I've never had any major conflicts. So right there is a win-win-win. But I make it a point whenever I do a bid for a job, I let them know up front, I'm a pastor. Your project is secondary. If there's a church emergency, I'm out the door. If there's a family emergency, I'm out the door. And it's finding that balance. What works with me is I don't overschedule myself during the week. I make sure that Wednesdays I have time to prepare my lesson and to check on shut-ins, to check on the church people. Even while I'm working throughout the day painting, when I take breaks, of course, we're in the middle of COVID right now, so I'm not able to visit nursing homes and hospitals like I used to. So I do a lot of my visiting over the phone. I can do that while I'm painting. So that's worked.
Yeah.
And what's difficult for me is I have that guilt complex that I have to spend 80 hours a week doing church work or I'm not being a good pastor. And I think I've been kind of conditioned that way over the years because that's the expectation that I think that has been placed on us pastors, but that's not really the case.
Yeah.
Maybe we have a handful of people that think, well, preacher, we pay you to get my groceries and we pay you to always be ready to come in a moment's notice. And we'll know I serve the Lord and Oh, I can tell you stories, John. I can tell you stories of ministry. Of course, I've been a pastor since '91. So I have a lot of stories of some people putting too much on the pastor that should, but a pastor that has a good church family, a good supportive family, there is no reason why they can't launch a business. I never thought I would until Jody introduced me to it, and just in 6 years, all I can say is wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely wow. And it's God. It's God.
Yeah.
It's God doing the work and God blessing the work.
Yeah.
And another confirmation that it's of the Lord.
I love that. I have one more question for you, and then maybe one more I'll save for our backstage content. But one thing I also like to talk about, pastors that are in some kind of bivocational ministry, and I apologize for the pounding you hear if it's coming through the mic. I've got some carpet layers up above me in our home today, putting down carpet. So anyway, I love to talk to pastors that are out in the marketplace about ministry opportunities that they get because they're in the marketplace, that if they were just sitting in their church office, they would not be able to get. Do you have any stories or, examples like that where you have found yourself doing ministry while you're working in the marketplace, if that makes sense?
Oh yeah, there's been, I would say, dozens in just the last 6 years of clients where, as I'm working on their project, and of course they feel comfortable sharing personal concerns because they know I'm a pastor and do counseling, and it's like 2 for 1. They pay me to paint and also get counseling. And there's been so many, I would say dozens of families that I believe God positioned me there to help them through a crisis. One particular person I had the privilege of leading to the Lord because they were going through hard times, and it's just amazing how God would lead me to people that I never would have met otherwise. And a lot of my clients now are not members of my church, but they're friends on Facebook where they watch our church services live.
Yeah.
And a lot of these clients that don't have a church affiliation, they don't go anywhere, but just doing that simple paint job, we developed a friendship, and we're on Facebook. We're Facebook friends, and they refer to me as their pastor, even though they don't attend here, but they support the ministry. I would say there's over a dozen that I can think of right now that I would have never been able to minister if not in this position. And I believe God knows the needs before we know them, and God sends us to the right people. It's just, I really can't put it in words, John, how people are hurting out there, and they don't have a pastor to call up. They don't have a church to get that support. And when I'm there and they begin to share what's going on, I put down my paintbrush, sit down, get a cup of coffee, and help them through the crisis.
Yep.
And that's another confirmation that
Yeah.
I believe that the Lord is using the secondary business to reach out in our community, because I paint in our community. It's just amazing. And as far as specific stories, of course, I can't share all of them because they're confidential. Because,
Sure.
But one was suicidal, one attempted, and I was able to get them help. Matter of fact, I had to call 911 when they called me at night, saying that they're going to end it. And this was a client, not a church member, a
Right.
client.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, that person got my business card, had me come paint their living room or garage or kitchen, and went through a crisis, and God already had a preacher there to help. So once again, John, it's another confirmation that the Lord's in it.
I love that. And that preacher was getting paid a livable wage while he's there serving. And it's ministry, whether you're painting someone's house or whether you're sitting behind your desk in your church office, you are being obedient to your call. And that's where I just feel like, man, if we can empower pastors to work through the mental hangups and in some cases, maybe the structural issues in their church that might, keep them held back from this sort of thing. If we can get them freed up to be out in the marketplace, doing something they love, something that God has gifted them to do, and doing well financially for their family, like, to me, that's going to help them stay in it much longer when there's health and vitality and financial margin there. So, Mike, I love your story, man. And we're going to invite you to stick around and join us backstage. Before we started the interview, you shared a really cool story with me, very specifically about a huge milestone that you've reached with your business. And I'm excited for you to share that with our audience. So we'll ask you to stick around for just a few more minutes and we'll have that conversation backstage. But do you mind, real quick, if someone had any questions, if anyone in our audience wanted to reach out and pick your brain about maybe starting a painting business specifically, or maybe they want to hire you to come and paint their house, I don't know. But if someone wanted to reach out and connect with you, Mike, what's the best way for someone to do that if you're open to it?
Yes. My cell phone is the best way to contact me because I never leave home without it.
All right.
304-993-3399.
Fantastic. So you're open to a pastor shooting you a text message or giving you a call if they wanted to go a little deeper with you.
And have them emphasize that they're not telemarketer. I don't need an extended warranty, okay? Because I don't answer my phone if I'm not sure what the number is because I'm so busy. But if you need some painting done, I'm booked till July of next year. So
fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, Mike, I love your story, and I'm grateful for you coming on and sharing. I know you may think, well, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a simple story, but it's going to be an inspiration to somebody listening to this. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, hey, thanks for watching this episode of the EntrePastors podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we release a new episode. If you'd like to get connected to other pastors who are learning to think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs, then we invite you to check us out on Facebook. Just search for the EntrePastors Connect group, answer a few of our simple questions there, and we'd love to include you in the conversations. And if you're really ready to go to the next level, then we invite you to join our EntrePastors membership community. When you become a monthly subscriber, you will receive access to courses, exclusive community, and coaching that will help you along in your own EntrePastors journey. If there's anything else we can do to serve you, please visit us at EntrePastors.com, and we will do our best to serve you there. God bless everybody. See you soon.